My name is Michael Ige. It may interest you to know that I was a high school math teacher for 7 years. And I know when you hear that, there are two things I feel may be going up in your mind. First is, what's the big deal about being a high school math teacher? Then the second thing may be, oh, it's just going to be an ordinary, the regular high school. I wish to let you know that there are two factors that make that school to be different from your regular high school. The first factor is it was an adult high school, meaning over 90% of the students in that school were 18 years and above. We even had people who were seniors, over 60 years, who were in that school at the same time. Then the second factor is all the students in the school were all former high school dropouts. So they've been in high school before and then they dropped out. Some dropped out for over 25 years and some, dropped out maybe just 6 months. But that was the composition of the school. Now, the topic we're going to be looking at today is a more or less report on the study which I did. And it has to do with high school dropout, class grade, and parents' education level, any relationship. To start it rolling, I have in here three captions, which I got from the internet. The first one says, every 26 seconds, a student drops out of school. When we look at that, that translates to, in 1 minute, that's about 390 students. And then when you project it into a year, we're talking about 1.2 million students dropping out of school. And that's a cause for alarm. Then the second caption is a message from someone to a former high school dropout. And it says, to all the students who drop out of school, who dropped out and failed high school, remember two things. One, you tried your best. Then, I don't like onions on my Big Mac. That gives us a perception of what the writer has about high school dropout. Now, especially if you look at the second statement in there, I don't like onions on my Big Mac. That's a reference to someone working in McDonald's. And that tells you the writer and many others have the feelings that once you drop out of high school, you cannot get, high-paying job. You rather be at McDonald's flipping burgers. Now, the third one is from a study by the National Center for Education Study in 2013, and it states 1 in 5 high school dropouts had a parent at home with a bachelor degree or higher. That's another call for concern. Now, our agenda today, I know I have 20 minutes. We are going to be looking at high school dropout, the methodology of the study, the data, the test, result, application, and conclusion. Now, I'm going to start off with this quote, which is just a definition of dropout. And it says, I quote, it's from John Gardner. It says, if dropout is defined to mean a person who has given up serious effort to meet his responsibilities, then every business, government agency, golf club, and university faculty will yield its quota. Now, let's reflect on this. It means in all spheres of life, we do have dropouts. So in a situation whereby you fail to meet your objective, you are a dropout. That's what it's saying. Now, let's look at high school dropout. Look at the caption that we have over there. It's an alarming a menace that is giving God the attention of the Time magazine, as you can see. Now, when we talk of defining dropout, Basically, the general thing is that dropout is just anybody who's unable to complete a program. But studies generally, there is never a completely agreed definition as to dropout. So it's a controversial thing, but that's not the issue I'm here to discuss today. Now, what are the dropout factors? Dropout factors range from family issues, school issues, the environment, and what have you. Now, when we look at these dropout factors, the ones that's of concern that's focused for this study is the family-related dropout, and it's related to the family. Now, you cannot be talking of family-related factors without looking at one, the education level of the parents, and that is the focus of this study. Now, when we look at past studies on dropouts, fine, it's been agreed that parents' educational level has impact on whether their wards or children will drop out or stay in school. Now, but those factors have mainly focused on recognizing that those have impact on it. But the gap is in the previous studies, majority of the studies did not even look at specific grade that those students are going to be dropping out. In essence, we're saying if a parent, had just high school diploma, at what grade will his children drop out? If the parent is a professor, if the kid will drop out of high school, at what grade is he going to be dropping out? So that's the gap that this study is trying to look at. Now, in terms of methodology, it's a quantitative design, and which is focusing on association or correlation between two variables. And survey method was used. There was a questionnaire that was administered to all the students in the school, and that's where the data for this study was collected. Now, what is the research question? It's saying, is there a relationship between parents' education level and students' high school dropout class grade? That is the question that is hypothesized for this study. Now, let's look at the data. Like I said, the school population was 197 students, out of which 109 responded to the survey, and that represents 55%, which is, a good response rate for a quantitative study. Then there are two variables that were considered. Both variables were ordinal, meaning each of the variables, they have categories, they have levels. The first variable, which is the independent, is looking at the parents' minimum education level, and that composed of 6 levels, starting from the elementary education up to college education. And then for the dependent variable, we had the student dropout grade, that is the grade they dropped out of high school. And in that, I had 5 levels. Those 5 levels, the first level has to do with below 9th grade. Essentially, we're looking at 7 and 8th grade. And then you have 10, 11, and 12. Now, the descriptive statistics. I have a collection of charts in here just for us to go quickly to have an idea of the descriptive statistics, especially for the participants. Now, the first one, which is the pie chart, has the gender of the students. You have the green one representing the female, and then the blue representing the male. And as you can see, almost 2/3 of the participants of these students were female. And then the first chart on the right part, which is in blue, is showing the charts for the grades that those students dropped out of high school. And if you look at it, the highest in there being at 11th grade. and then the lowest was ninth grade. And then the red chart below is showing the minimum education level of the parents. And if you look at it, the highest, the highest being parents with elementary education. And then it goes, the last being for those parents who completed maybe 2 or 4 year college education. And then the lowest it happened to be those parents who had just who completed trade school. And then the last chart is showing the student ethnicity. On the two extreme ends, you have the white and then you have the other ethnic group. But the two bars at the middle, happen to be for the minority. You have the Hispanic and then you have the African American. The African American students happen to be the highest in terms of numbers of students in that school. So now, when we look at the statistical test used for this study, the summer delta test, popularly known as summer day, was used. And it's more or less like a correlation test. And the summer day examines statistical relationship between ordinal variable and it uses cross tabulation, meaning it's going to compare each of those level of the variable among to each other. And then it shows a measure of association between the variable. And it's very reliant on dependent variable. And in terms of gauging the results, it ranges from -1 on the extreme low negative correlation to +1, wherein if you have 0, it indicates that there's no relationship. And for this study, I used the SPSS application fascia 24. Now, here's the result for the Summers delta. Now, when you look at the symmetric column in there, you have the two variables stated there. But the way this thing is drawn is that you focus on the dependent variable that you are using for your study. And for this study, we use the high school dropout grade is the dependent variable. So the result, the value that you have in there is in circle, which is 0.897. That's a very, very high correlation. And on the extreme end, you have the significance in terms of how statistically significant this study is. Now, the results show that there is a strong positive correlation and it's statistically significant. Therefore, we rejected the null hypothesis. Now, here's a chart that's going to really show it more for us to see. Now, when you look at this bar, each of those bars, they have colors, and they represent the grade of dropout of the students. So, for instance, if it's below ninth grade, you have the blue, and that happens to be. Unfortunately, this is not too clear. Let me just see. This is in blue. This is in blue. These are in purple, and that happens to be the 11th grade. And like we saw from the district statistics, 11th grade happened to be the highest number, the class, the grade that you have highest number of students dropping out. And it reflects, it's showing in 3 categories, or 4 categories of the parents. Now, when we look at this, we see that from the parents' elementary educational level, the thing was dropping down. But where the one that is very interesting and very revealing to me is this. This is a yellow. It's in yellow. It's applicable to the 12th grade, the number of students that drop out of 12th grade. Now, one thing that is calling for concern here is this. Their parents have had 2 to 4 year college education. Then you ask yourself, why? It's acceptable if, for instance, we have majority of them being parents who never completed high school. But how do you account for children or what of parents who are college educated having their kids dropping out in 12th grade? Now, do we want to say they don't know the value of education? Do you want to say they are not representatives of their parents? So that's a big one. Because how do you account for dropping out at the last year? Some dropped out maybe 6 months to the expiration, to the completion of their high school diploma. Some just at the 12th grade, but that is a big revelation for me, particularly for this study. And that's one of the things that I recommended that we do. So these are the key findings when we look at all this. One, more students drop out at 11th grade. Then more students with low-level educated parents drop out at 10 and below grades. And then the biggest of them all is more students with college-educated parents drop out at 12th grade. Now, what are the implications of this? Oh, oh, I don't know why the implications. Okay, well, I have it in here. I'll just go up. I can see it in here.
Oh, yeah, the color.
Dark font. You got
It's
the
the
dark
font.
font.
Yeah, I don't know why. It was white like the others.
You can tell.
I'll tell you now. Now, the first implication is that parents' education attainment is a silent influencing factor in children's education. That's one of the implications. Then, based on this study, statistical tests has confirmed that at 90% certainty that parents' education influences dropout grade. And then the third implication is that it says that the higher the parents' education, the higher the dropout grade of the high school student. Just like in our simple economics. And then another implication is for us as educators and policy planners, the need for us to focus, to put some attention into dropout issues. And even in our schools whereby we have students who are going to be future educators, we need to call their attention to that, because identifying this and understanding this will help a bit in terms of handling some of their students. And the conclusion, which is the last thing, is the study was just an attempt on the silent issue of parent education as a factor in high school dropout. And then it went as far as the deeper analysis of relationship between parents' education and high school dropout grade. And then the study revealed that there's a very high linear association between the two variables, the parents' education level and the dropout grade. Now, further study is recommended to be embarked upon to look at the interaction, deeper interaction between those two variables. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this short presentation. I have references and then questions time.
Could you go back to your your horizontal bar graph,
Okay,
please?
this one.
Yes. So my question on that is where you have completed trade school and college dropout, why did you choose to put it in that order as opposed to completing high school, dropping out of college, and completing trades?
Now, what I looked at is that when you look at this, it's just in terms of the how the value based on it, because somebody who went as far as high school, college, and dropped out is a bit higher than somebody who completed high school. Because you must have completed high school. Yeah.
That I understand, but it's just those two. Because when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking if I have completed trade school, you're saying that I am not as high as
Oh, okay, I got what you're saying. I didn't even pay attention to that. All I did was to just to look in terms of, okay, these are the college, those who completed college, and then those who didn't complete college.
But if you switch them, I think you'll find even a greater linear correlation there, because I don't know, to me, I'm just thinking that if I completed trade school, I perhaps have had more success with what I'm doing as a parent compared to dropping out of college. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I'll look into that.
Okay.
Thank you for that observation. Yeah.
Another one that occurred to me is, in your descriptive statistics, the vast majority of people you were working with, am I right, African American, and what was the other predominant
Hispanic.
culture?
Yeah.
Hispanic.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hopelessness in those communities.
Yeah, it has to do.
And the thing I think about is, how is this hopelessness communicated? And to me, the height of hopelessness is when somebody is within 3 or 4 months of graduating from high school and chooses to drop out.
Yeah.
So there's a cultural aspect to me to investigate here, through maybe follow-up surveys, potentially as well. Because your descriptive statistics, you're dealing with a sample that, and it's one of the things I really love about this study, that you were able to get this kind of sample and zero in, and as a result, you had this very surprising finding.
As a matter of fact, this particular study, I did a major research that covered the school. So it was from that study that I extracted this data and used to compare this. So, and just like you said, the environment to the area where they are matters a lot. If you're familiar with Indianapolis, the school is actually in Indianapolis. It's one of the schools. They have almost 7, because part of the school belongs to a non-profit organization, Goodwill. And one of the things that they tried to do was to look at the dropout rate in Indiana State. Then before they started, it got as high, it was getting around 77,000 in a year. And that was why they embarked on that. And once they started the school, it caught like fire. In Indiana State, they had, by my last campaign, when I left them, at least they had 14 in Indiana State. And it was spreading all over United States. So they have it in Texas, I think in Washington, and
They have one in St. Louis.
Yeah, they have it in St. Louis. So it's very important, and it was very good concept for them, because the setting was such that even the students who had kids, they had child care for them. Everything was free. And the idea behind it was to be able to take people out and get them back to school, and then turn them brand, so that they do not constitute burdens to the government. And it was very effective. I hope I'm not taking, still within, right? In the absence of any other question, I hope we can take 1 or 2 things from this. I have just about 9 copies of the papers, which I hope, I wish I could have had more. But then, here's my email in case anybody needs more. I can be able to. So you can be able to pick one.
We're all together, so we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ike.
Yes.
Did I say your name right?
Yeah.